Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 18 of the Syracuse Sport Business Conference's digital series. My name is Danielle. I'm a member of the Syracuse Sport Business Conference, and I'm going to be moderating tonight. And I'm super excited to bring you all today's speaker. Joining us is Dionna Widder. She is the Chief Revenue Officer for the Houston Dynamo and Houston Dash. She graduated with her degree in business from Central Michigan University, and she started her career in season ticket sales with the Detroit Lions. Then she moved on to work for the Indiana Pacers as Senior Director of Ticket Sales. That's the NBA League office as the Director of Team Marketing and Business Ops. Then landed with the Cavs as their VP of Ticket Sales and is now currently with the Houston Dynamo and Houston Dash as their Chief Revenue Officer. She's also a board member of the Pro Sports Assembly, a volunteer organization advancing inclusion and diversity in the professional sports industry. She also hosts the podcast Women Blazers, and she's a mom of 3. So Dionna, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Gosh, you listing that out makes me sound like I'm crazy. Yes.
So I guess I kind of just briefly went over your background, but can you kind of start with discussing your background in the NBA and then kind of how that helped you get into your current role with the Houston Dynamo and Houston Dash, and kind of touching on the differences between working for the NBA versus the MLS and NWSL.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I'm happy to. Well, thanks for having me. And thank you everybody for joining us. And I appreciate Danielle for you being host and moderator. So my majority of my career I spent in the NBA, as you had mentioned. I started off with the Indiana Pacers. I spent a little time with the Detroit Lions, NBA League office, and then the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I'll be honest, my passion going into college was I wanted to work for the NBA team. And I think it wasn't until I got into the Pacers and started to see sort of how the landscape and the world was, or the industry of the sports world was, that started to inspire me to want to continue to grow. My time in the NBA was absolutely incredible. I mean, the NBA is at the forefront of innovation and fan experience, and I would say across all of sports. And my time at the Cavs was remarkable. I spent, that was where I was prior to coming, here to the MLS and with the Houston Dynamo and Dash. And those 4 years I was there, I actually got to the Cavs right before LeBron had made his announcement that he was coming home to Cleveland. And so I went there. The team had been, they were at the bottom of the league when I went there. So I was excited to go there from the league office and sort of take what I learned at the league office and put it to play with the team at that VP level. And I got there and I was there to help turn the team around. And then LeBron came 3 months later, and he helped sort of flip the business upside right for us. And now it was this whole new focus about how do you maximize revenue? How do you create fan loyalty when you have a bunch of fans and individuals coming in and engaging with your brand and your product, mainly for this moment in time and to be there for LeBron. So for 4 years, it was about building a fan loyalty program with our membership platform and evolving that in the right direction. It was about maximizing revenue through this sort of heightened time and leveraging those opportunities. And after 4 years, of doing that, it's like, what more can I accomplish? I felt like we hit all our franchise records. The NBA is, again, at the forefront. So when you have huge moves and huge advancements in the NBA, you're moving the needle very little because there's not a lot of more room to move it. And when I was looking at my opportunities about growth, I couldn't help but to not sort of see the MLS and what was happening in the MLS. This league is growing so rapidly, and it's on this amazing growth curve. And I was just extremely attracted to the opportunity to not only grow, to make an impact in the MLS and NWSL from a leadership perspective, but it also allowed me to also grow professionally and personally into a C-level position and take on more responsibilities from a revenue perspective. So before, my track was all ticket sales, and now I oversee all of revenue, which is inclusive of corporate partnerships. And so the biggest thing, I would say the difference is there isn't a lot of difference, to be honest with you, in terms of like responsibility and opportunity. I would say the opportunity is probably the biggest part of the difference, is that the opportunity of what we can accomplish and the runway to do that is very defined. And I think that, ultimately, there's a lot of similarities across all of the sports teams.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like especially as a young like sport industry professional and as a sport management student coming in, you think that all these different leagues are going to be so different from each other, but you kind of start to realize that the skills like translate across like all the different sports.
Absolutely. It's just time of year and how many games, so going from 44 home games, for the NBA team for the Cavs, now having 17 for the men and 12 for the women, and how the season's spread out, it allows you to have more time in between each match. And so that's been different. But outside of that, you're absolutely right. The talent and the skills definitely transfer.
So what was it specifically about sales and kind of the revenue generating side of the industry specifically that kind of gauged your interest and made you want to pursue that path rather than a different part of the industry?
Yeah. So when I was in college, I like I said, I knew I wanted to go into sports, but I didn't know exactly what that was. And I had an opportunity when I was younger to be at a game where I got to see a bunch of people walking around in suits. And I was like, I don't know what those people do, but I want to do that. And so when I got to my freshman year, I went on the Pistons website and I looked up career opportunities, and they were hosting job fairs. I'm sure everybody's been to a job fair or knows about job fairs that teams host. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go there and I'm going to ask a bunch of questions as a freshman. And I went to the tables of all the professional sports teams that were there. And I said, hey, I want to work in sports. And I want to know who you hire and any advice you would give to somebody like myself who wants to break in and be somebody that what I have to do to be the person you would want to hire as an intern, as a junior, and then coming out of college as a senior. And everybody across the board sort of introduced me to ticket sales and what it was. And it was the entry level position. But ultimately, what I loved the most is, and I think it was who I talked to. And I wish I would have remembered who I talked to specifically, but they were very adamant of expressing their passion that it's more than ticket sales. Like if you're in the ticket sales department, you are at the forefront of developing fans, connecting fans with their passion of the game. And so you're on the phone getting to talk to these individuals about that passion and giving them the opportunity and showing them how they can be a part of that experience as much as they could afford, basically. And I thought, man, that's incredible. Like, I love that. And I would love that opportunity to create the fan base, because I believe that the fans in the stadium, it helps drive success on the court or the field. I love the opportunity that I could have to make a difference in that position. So I was very connected with what they had shared with me. And one of the advices that was also given was, in college, understanding marketing and advertising specifically would be a great avenue to learn sort of the background of a sale. So marketing is sort of the science behind a sale. And then the sale is really sort of, the development skill set of sales processes, your confidence and how you sort of present yourself and present the product. And I thought that was really interesting. So I changed my major to marketing and business. And then I focused heavily on some aspects of just gaining sales perspectives of like serving and bartending throughout college. And so that was my focus. I went back to that career for every single year, just building up my relationships and building sort of this confidence. And so by the time it was my senior year, I had an invitation to go to an NBA career fair that was actually hosted in Chicago. And I walked away with 6 job offers with 6 teams across the NBA. And all of them were sales related. And once I got into sales, I will just additionally say, in addition to sort of the opportunity to connect fans with their passion and be a part of, filling up a stadium bowl, which is extremely rewarding. The other thing I loved about sales is that this is the only section, I would say, or revenue, the revenue vertical is the only area in this industry where you have complete control of your success. And there isn't somebody holding you back. Like, it's very similar. I always describe it like you're an athlete of the industry. You can come in as a freshman, right? Like on the basketball team, and you can get bumped up to be on the varsity team, and you can be the captain of that team, all based on the talent and the success that you have on the field or the court. That's the same sort of mindset and opportunity you have in sales. You can come in, if you're the best salesperson, you're at the top of the board, then you're going to get the promotions, you're going to get the next opportunities. In addition to that, you also have control of what you make. Every sale I made determined how much money I was going to make. So if I wanted to make 6 figures in my second year, all I had to do is sell X amount to get X amount. And again, just sort of knowing that I'm in control of my success was very, very rewarding, especially when you're a woman or a person of color and you feel like there's these barriers. There's nothing that can stop you when you actually prove the numbers. And I thought that was so strong and so valuable. And it's something that was always stuck with me since that very beginning.
Yeah, and I always love talking to people who come from the sales side of the industry because I think everyone has their preconceived notion of what sales is, and especially we always hear that it's the way to like get your foot in the door. But talking with sales professionals such as yourself and hearing like the passion and like what actually drives working on that side, it kind of flips some of those stereotypes on its head.
Yes, I want to flip more people because it is an incredible path and it's extremely rewarding. It's challenging, it's competitive, and it's fulfilling. So if you're somebody who has that sort of competitive edge and you like having, again, like I said, sort of control of success, then I mean, this is definitely the way to go. And again, you're just a part of the game. You play such a huge part of the success of the organization. It's a critical position. And so there's a lot of benefits to that as well.
Yeah, so kind of moving on, talking a little bit more about your specific role as Chief Revenue Officer. Obviously, no day in sports ever looks the same, but could you talk a little bit about what kind of a typical day might look like, and then how COVID has affected and will continue to affect what your role looks like?
Yeah, no, those are good questions. Yeah, I think honestly, my day is really just packed with meetings. I'm in this position, you're sort of always looking at the business at a 60,000, 30,000 foot view, and you are strategically discussing and analyzing and developing plans for the future. And then the individuals who are under my preview, so my two VPs of corporate partnerships and ticket sales, they're responsible for taking that execution, working with me in the strategies and execution. So it's not done solely by myself. It's obviously a team and a collaborative effort. And then they're then working with their team on the execution. So as the team is executing what we're doing today, let's say right now, we have a game this Saturday. There's a lot of efforts to sell the game this Saturday. There's efforts of selling season tickets for next year. As well as getting group deposits for next year. So suites and partnerships for next year. And we're already thinking about like next year and a whole nother scale and different scenarios that are happening. So for me, there's just a lot of discussion, planning, strategizing that happens from a day to day, which requires a lot of conversations and collaborating across the organization. As well as networking with my peers across the industry to discuss best practices and things that they're doing. It's always helpful that in this industry, we're very tight knit and that we're able to work together to work through solutions. That's why you see a lot of teams do a lot of the same things. Because I mean, if it's a best practice, you're going to want to follow suit. And it's always fun to be a leader in those next practices as well. In terms of COVID, our world, obviously changed significantly when it happened, and we're all working virtually. So for my team specifically, everybody's still working from home. We are hosting events now at BBVA Stadium, so we can host a socially distanced event, max capacity of 3,000 people, socially distanced. And we have a game, like I said, this Saturday. So the events have been going really well. The safety and protocol and health plan that's been put in place has been fantastic. And, for us, I think we're just extremely hopeful that things will continue to move and progress in the right direction. But we're utilizing this time to really leverage the opportunity for the future. So we've already made a big shift to 2021, and a lot of the planning and selling and execution is happening right now for 2021.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So kind of going along with the topic of COVID, I know during the pandemic is when you kind of really started your podcast, Women Blazers.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I was first, like, I guess, introduced and connected to you. And the whole purpose of the podcast is to just share stories of women kind of blazing their own trails and breaking barriers within the sport industry. So can you talk a little bit about what inspired you to create this podcast and to share these stories and what goals you have for it moving forward?
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for being a listener of the podcast. So when I got to Houston, I actually had started thinking about something I could do in this space. When I was in Cleveland, I was a part of starting an internal women's networking group called Women of the Q. And I also launched, along with some of our sales leaders at the Cavs, a Women and Minorities Sales Symposium, which an effort was to inspire more women and minorities to take a sales path and for us to recruit women and minorities into our sales program, because we had just huge disparities between who was being hired at the entry level. And then obviously that was affecting the growth in our organization and what we're seeing from a leadership perspective. And that's why we've been seeing these disparities. So I think the wanting to enhance the pipeline was significant. But through the conversations, you learn so much, and there's always, you can't just, for me, it's like, I can't just blame the organization from not hiring, and I can't just blame the women for feeling one way either. So how can I help sort of bridge the gap of understanding? And I thought, maybe I'll host an event. Do I do a blog? I'm not much of a writer. and well, I started listening to podcasts since I've been here in Houston because I have a long commute. So, wow, this is the platform. Like, if I could just have conversations with women, that are doing incredible things in this industry, I think it would be a very powerful way to expose a number of things. One, there's this notion that this industry is just dominated by men. There are some amazing women, and part of my French, doing some badass things in this industry, and you should know them. You should know who they are and what they're doing. And that's across all the sports. So I wanted to elevate those profiles. I also wanted to elevate their journey because everybody has their own journey. And I think when you listen to the podcast, there's this level of respect to understand, like, there isn't one way to get there. I have to follow what matters to me in my life, my goals. And I wanted to enhance sort of that conversation. And everybody has their own experiences. And I wanted to make sure that was elevated as well. And I wanted to inspire other people to sort of listen to these stories and sort of gain some insights for themselves and have a self-reflection about maybe thinking about their goals, what's possible, start to remove some of those barriers for themselves. If you're a woman that's listening. And then the other side, as men listeners, I have a really great audience of men listeners. And what I love about the men listener side, the feedback I've received is like this level of appreciation and respect for the hustle and the game that these women had. And you often think that we're different, but actually we're very similar. We want the same things. We're working toward the same things. We're dealing with some of the same things, but for some reason we're not talking about those things. And we're not sharing those situations. If I'm a woman and I'm talking to another woman, we're going to have this like real conversation. And when I'm talking to a man, I'm going to talk about business. I'm going to leave all my personal stuff to the side. Now, here's an opportunity for you to like hear that, on this podcast. So that's the reason why I launched it. I actually had it all set up and ready to go around Christmas time. And I put it on the shelf thinking I wouldn't have time to really dedicate the time to do it. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and until after the season. And so when COVID hit, it definitely allowed me to go, okay, like, it's going to be okay that I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Let's just go at it and see if I can figure this out. And my first guest, Lisa Figgenbaum, she's like, you're going to do this. You're going to call me next Thursday. I'm ready to do that first interview. And I said, all right, we'll get it going. And I remember feeling nervous about launching it, but I'm so happy I did. It's been extremely rewarding, and I can tell it's definitely making the difference I've wanted it to make.
Yeah, I know for me personally, it helped a lot, especially after we were all sent home from school, and it was really stressful not knowing what I was going to be doing for my summer because all of my internship plans got canceled. It was really helpful to just have that to listen to and realize that, like you said, like, no one's journey ever looks the same, and it's okay if, you like, there are some opportunities that maybe you don't miss out at, like, or that you don't have at this time.
Right.
So I recommend it to a lot of people because I personally enjoy it as a young aspiring professional in the sport industry.
Wonderful.
So obviously you oversee the revenue streams for an MLS team and an NWSL team. So are there really any differences in trying to sell and generate revenue for the Houston Dynamo as well as the Houston Dash, who are the 2020 NWSL champions?
Yeah. There, honestly, there are some differences. And I would say the differences are the exposure. Obviously it's one thing that we want to see more from the women's game. And I think this year has been just a incredible, unorthodox year for the NWSL. And big props to our commissioner, Lisa Baird. I mean, she took on this effort of COVID, and she saw it as an opportunity, not as something that was going to bring the league down. And it's really helped drive this elevation of the league and just the power of the storytelling behind the women who make this league so amazing. So I think coming out of this season, we're going to see a lot of things happening. I think you probably saw today, if you were paying attention, Angel City FC, the new Los Angeles NWSL team, just announced like their official name and additional new like powerhouse, celebrity owners, which is, again, brings more and sheds more light on sort of the opportunity of this league and what it can be. So what it has been, though, it's been under the radar, and every 4 years when there's a World Cup, people pay attention. So, and then it kind of goes down, and then the World Cup happens, and then people, and so it's like, how do we get to this level and stay at this level and keep building on that exposure? And it's going to be through brands connecting, engaging with us at that level, and helping elevate the power of the league and the women who are the athletes in that league. It's going to be more exposure from a broadcast perspective. I think we have a great deal now with CBS and Twitch. And I think that as that continues to grow and develop, I think there'll be more exposure. So the more that we can expose the players, the stories, everything else, I think it's going to help from a sales perspective, generate more revenue. And I think that's the key right now, is the difference is what you're getting in value. How many, and generally when you're looking about a partner specifically, they're looking at engagement, eyeballs, how many people will they touch by connecting, engaging with your sports team to elevate their brand. And the dollars will definitely shift based on the number of those people. So we have a huge responsibility to elevate the game, to make it more relevant and more connected with fans of the game of soccer, but also in our communities. And so that's probably the biggest difference, is sort of what we get and how we start to connect those points of revenue and what we're getting from a value perspective. That's the biggest difference, but the process is the same. We're selling our tickets the same. We're selling the sponsorships in the same manner. I think for our club, one of the biggest shifts that we made this last year is we have our marketing team made a shift for us to have a one club mentality. So before it was the Dash and the Dynamo, completely separate entities. Now it's one entity. And when we go out with marketing efforts, like the women are getting the same level of branding and interest and post and video content that the men are getting. And I think that's really, really important. And we've seen a nice shift with that change of positioning, and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely very excited to see kind of how both leagues continue to grow, but especially the NWSL.
Yeah.
So kind of going off of talking about sales and your experience within sales, do you have a favorite sale that you've made, or any sales that have kind of helped propel your career, or kind of helped you like think, okay, like I can do this, like I can stay in the game? And
yeah, it's probably in the very beginning. I think that so I had an aha moment that first year. I was a group seller at the Indiana Pacers. And I was struggling really bad. And, I was hired in, and I wasn't one of the first ones on the board. I felt like I was like, did I make a mistake thinking I could do this? And group sales is really interesting because it's one of my favorite areas of the group sales team, because it's this opportunity to really take your creative marketing aspects and combine it with the aspects of sales. So you're not selling like, you have opportunities to sell like traditional packages, but you get an opportunity to like connect that group's sort of core aspect of what they do with an experience with the game is one of the main things you sell in groups. So we had this opportunity at the Pacers that was called Concourse Entertainment. It was like this carve out on the concourse. Nobody sold it because nobody knew it really to sell. It was like, I got every once in a while somebody would sell it. And I was like, wow. I was like, okay, let me go back to like the best thing to do sometimes is to start with what you know. That's one of the first things they teach you in sales. Like start with something you know so you can build some confidence. If you know the product, you can talk to it better, or the audience, you can talk to it better. So my high school, I came from an odd high school where our high school marching band was like 7-time state champions. 75 or something % of the school was in marching band. I mean, it was one of those, like, it could be like a movie where like during the football game, the football players wouldn't go to the locker room. They would actually in their football costume, like march. It was that crazy. And so marching band was huge in my school. I didn't play. I was a nerd, I guess, because I was one of the cool band guys, which is weird to say that, but that's so true. So I got into, I was like, well, what about marching bands? Like they love to perform in front of people, and sort of pep band and all the bands. I was like, I'm going to start calling bands and inviting them to perform at our games. And, oh, by the way, you have to buy 100 tickets to do it. That's the catch, is that you have to buy 100 group tickets to get this 45-minute spot in the concourse. And so I would use my experience of talking about my high school band, who they were, and everybody knew who they were, which was awesome. And I got to use that as my in. And I started just banging out calls to marching bands, and I booked up all of the marching band spots and this Concourse Entertainment. And once I sort of understood sort of the power of invitation versus like trying to sell them the tickets, but sell the experience, that was a game changer for me. that opened my eyes to so many things. Like, you can't lead with the sale, you have to lead with the experience, and then the sale sort of follows that experience. And that was probably my best sale process and my sales opportunity I had coming out in the beginning.
I love that you capitalized on marching band, because I was in marching band in high school and we definitely weren't like cool at all.
No, I mean, these are the most popular people in our school, were like the marching, and then people are like, why? I'm like, it was like the number 2, the band, then the jocks, and then everyone else. You had two options to be.
I love that. So one of the first lessons that I think like we were told coming in as sport management students was you have to network. It's not necessarily always about what you know as much as who you know. So can you talk about kind of some of your best practices for networking and any like, networking successes that you've had? Just kind of touch on networking.
Yeah, no, networks are very, very powerful. Being within somebody's network and be connecting with somebody is extremely powerful. I think it goes just beyond knowing that person, though. The person has to know, like, the power of the networking in the relationship is based on the fact that this person would put their name behind you. Just knowing me might not be enough, or knowing this person would be enough, but it's about making sure that person has something good to say about you. So you have to build beyond the network and sort of think about the relationship and what are you sharing with this person. So for an example, in the very beginning, I remember being introduced to someone and wanting to network with them, and then asking them, hey, can I follow up with you if I have any questions? Or yeah, sure. But then beyond that, I would do something. I'd have a good sale, or I would do something big, and I go, hey, I'm number 2 on the board, and I'm really excited about this opportunity. I wanted to share it with you. Any advice about how to get into number 1, and let's have a call. And so I'd have a call, and and there was this like relationship, like, I want to get nuggets from you, but I also want to share my successes and start to build this sort of rapport. When I saw that person doing something, they might be in an article on LinkedIn or something else, I would shoot them a note. Congratulations, that's amazing. And we would start to, again, just continue that rapport. So I think in networking, and when you think about networking, I think the key here is the connection and the continuation of that connection. It can't just be the one phone call. That's not networking. I think that's the biggest thing, is the network piece has to get you in, and then you have to then focus beyond network and think about the relationship. It's the power of those relationships that's so important. And then the relationship web from that, like their network, the people that they're networked in with, you now have a 1 degree, 2 degree separation from that person. And when you start to talk through people and somebody says, oh, do you know Dionna? And they're like, oh yeah, I know Dionna. Hopefully it's a good thing, not a bad thing. And how do you start to build that brand around yourself? And I think that's a combination of the work, your results, and then the relationship through that process.
Yeah, I definitely think also COVID, at least for me personally, really forced me to kind of up my networking, because there was really nothing else I could do. So I started reaching out to people and, asking to jump on Zoom calls, because now you can actually establish a little bit more of a connection being face to face rather than over the phone. And it was something that I was personally afraid to do earlier, like a couple years ago as a freshman. Yeah. Now it's like, oh, like I have to schedule a Zoom call this week just as like a personal goal. So I think
I love that. I will say that this year, because of COVID, I have never had so many individuals reach out to me. It has been overwhelming, the amount of people have reached out to me, and I want to do my part. Like I try to say yes to every single one, and try to get those calls in with people. I think it's important. But yeah, I take advantage of that. And I think LinkedIn specifically is a very powerful tool to start to engage with individuals and building that network for sure.
Definitely. I love LinkedIn personally. Mm-hmm. So something that I kind of noticed, and also, going off of constantly being on LinkedIn, is everyone, like on social media in general, we all love to talk about our successes we have, and we all love to talk about the yes opportunity that we got, but we never want to share our failures or the mistakes or the no's that we've made along the way. So do you have like a failure or a mistake or a no that you've had at any point in your career that has stuck with you and really taught you something?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think when I think about my career path, it's been directed around things I've ultimately, I guess, failed at. And I would say, I think most people don't go that route on LinkedIn or share those things because the best thing you can do is go forward with a positive attitude. So if you dwell on the things you mistaked, then that means you didn't learn from that, and I think for me, to give you a little bit of the mistakes or where I failed is like, when I was with the Pacers, I was there in my second year. I was #1 in group sales and I was up for a manager position and I didn't get the position. And I was crushed. I was crushed by this situation I was in. And it was in that moment that I realized, like, wow, I really want to be in leadership. And if it wasn't for that no and not getting it, I wouldn't have known the motion and the passion that I had to want to grow into a leader. And it also helped me at that point to find that it was more than just wanting to be the group sales manager, which was the position I was up for. Like, I want to lead my own ship. Like it really inspired me to want to lead my own ship. So I actually left, and that's when I went to Detroit Lions to sell season tickets, because I realized my whole beginning of my career was group sales. And I didn't get to really learn season tickets at the level that I could have if I would have went into inside sales. And so I left and went to Detroit Lions. And ultimately, I got a call back from the Pacers to come back and be the director of group sales. And I was really young when it happened, but that's the case. Later on, I had an opportunity where I sort of sat in this interim position at the Pacers. I was the interim vice president for a year and a half, never getting the title, but ultimately getting the responsibility. And again, just realizing how much I wanted that role and feeling that connection to that role. I didn't get it. The CMO decided to bring in 2 VPs over me, and I ultimately became the senior director, which is what you'll see on LinkedIn. And I was crushed, but I think that moment, I wasn't crushed like I was the first time. I'd really grown from the first time that happened to me. I realized, you know what, like, this is a moment of opportunity. Like, I'm thankful for the opportunity I had. I'm grateful for the leaders that had given me that opportunity. And now this gives me an opportunity to go, I am ready. It helped define that I was confident, I was ready, even though the position wasn't there and that wasn't the right place for it. I knew that I could go somewhere else and probably be successful in that role. And I was able to gain some confidence from it. So within the failure, again, there's just this opportunity to reflect on the opportunity and what you really want, and that you can stop and let them tell you no, and you can reflect. For me, that always pushed me forward. The no just gave me more reasons to prove. And that's when the league office opportunity came. And I went to New York, and I was in, I worked in, I didn't live in New York. I worked in New York for 2 years and traveled the country, consulting teams across the NBA and WNBA and G League. And that was an incredible experience. And, I think in that moment, that was crazy, because I had just had twins in that process, and I was traveling away from twins. So I was probably failing as a mother and as a wife, leaving my kids every week, newborn babies. And that was hard, but yet again, like, it was the best decision for me and my family. And then went to the Cavs, so there had been these moments where, I hit a wall. I didn't ultimately get what I was working for. But again, I think that happening was supposed to happen. I really believe that those things were supposed to happen. And I always move forward with a sense of more fire, more determination than I had before. And so though they're failures, it's hard to sort of look at them as failures sometimes, but they are ultimately, when you look at it, I did fail. I didn't get the job. I didn't get the opportunity. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me as well. It led me to here.
Yeah, I love that you hit on letting that, like, kind of that no light your fire. One of my professors, I remember, this has stuck with me since my freshman year. He told us, you hear no a lot in the sport industry because it weeds out the people who really don't want to be there. Because the ones who do are the ones that, when they hear the first no, they're going to come back again and they're going to keep trying.
Right. It's a good test.
Yep. So kind of our last question before we jump into a little bit of Q&A. Is just kind of any of your best advice that you have for young students looking to break into the sports industry, or even students trying to navigate the current job market as we're still kind of in the middle of a pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, one, I wish I had better advice for what to do during a pandemic. I think this generation and what you guys are going through is insane. And I'm really interested to see, the strength of the talent that will come into our industry that came through this experience. As I think about women blazers in the interviews, like, someday we're going to interview somebody who came through this, who's like excelling, and this will be the reason why they're so good, and I think that's really exciting to think about. In terms of advice, I give this advice often, and hopefully you connect with it. But for me, from my own experience, my advice generally usually is knowing who you are and who you want to be is one of the greatest assets you can have. And I say that because so often I think we're told, in college, like, you don't have to know, you can like figure it out as you go and you'll discover, which is true, you'll get there. But imagine the power of knowing. And if you know, then you can be very literal. You can be intentional with the choices you make, the steps you make, how you practice and prepare for those positions. And then also to grow your network in the right direction. You'll be talking to the people who can truly help you and sponsor you through your process. And I knew in college that I was going to be in ticket sales. That allowed me to come out of college with 6 job offers because I spoke so passionately about what I had done to get to that point. I could not, the power of that connection of understanding that how bad I wanted it. And I was going to do anything not to fail, connecting with people. And then from there, knowing I wanted to be a leader, my leaders, I was very boisterous with them. I wanted to be a leader and they helped me get there. But if I didn't know, what help could they provide? Like I have to come up and decide what I want. And it's allowed me to sort of, again, excel in my path. And when people ask me, okay, Dionna, you're 36 and you're a C-level executive, for a major league sports team, how did you do it? It's like, I always knew what I wanted. And I always knew what I was working toward. So there was no sense of delay in that process. And I think there's just a lot of power in that. So knowing who you are, I'm true to the person I've always been. But ultimately I knew who I wanted to be and what direction I was growing. And so I've always been allowed to go there. And I truly have never, I've never gone off that path because I've had such passion and love for what I do. I've never questioned it. So there hasn't been any delay in that, in becoming who I've become.
I love that. That is great advice. I think, I've always heard authenticity. And I think it's very clear when you can tell that someone's not being genuine to who they are. And so
yeah.
I personally is what I always try to follow, kind of just being authentic, and you'll end up where you're supposed to be. I remember being crushed that I didn't get a dream internship that I had. And I was talking to one of my advisors and she's like, you're who you are, you always are, and you just didn't get that role and it wasn't a fit. You'll find somewhere where the person that you are fits in with that right. Environment.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that.
So we're gonna round out our conversation with a few Q&A questions from our team. Okay. So to start out, this is from Anna Genter on our team. Within working in sports, women aren't typically associated with revenue generating roles. How do you think we can change that narrative? And why do you think it is important to see more women in this side of sports?
I think it's extremely important to see women more in the revenue generating roles. I think it goes back, honestly, I think it's a combination of things. One, the structure of a sales floor was very much a fraternity, locker room as sort of environment. That's how it had been for many, many years until cultures, I think, started to shift. And there's still a sense of a fraternity, but it's more of a co-ed fraternity now, I would say. You're part of a class of individuals that come in and you're growing with those individuals. But there's, again, it's very competitive and it's cutthroat and, it's aggressive sometimes, just trying to hit goals and try to hold yourself accountable and your team holding you accountable to goals. There's a lot of pressure as well. And I think traditionally men held those roles because, men were sort of fit that profile. And I think it's so important that we break that pattern. And I think there's a pattern issue there in terms of how and what we think the profiles of a good salesperson looks like, talks like, dresses like. All of that needs to sort of be broken down and built back up. So I think that's one. And I think we're in that. I think that we're in that process and have been in that process the last couple of years. You see a lot more women coming into sales, but you're seeing a barrier of growth of women. And the question there is, okay, look at the leadership teams. Do they feel connected? Do they feel like there's a place for them there? That's a good question. So that you think about the environment, the cultures that we're growing women in terms of sales positions, and how we present the role too, I think is really a challenge. It's described as sort of this aggressive, make 100 phone calls a day. I remember them painting me this picture like, you're not going to want to do it, but if you can do it, you'll be real good. I remember that sort of rhetoric, that rhetoric when somebody would explain to me what the job was. And like, no wonder nobody wants to do this job. Like, but when you get into it, you feel that connection of what it is. I think it's sold wrong, to be honest with you. On the woman's side, yeah, I think that's there's a disconnect of wanting to do it. You think about roles like, community relations and helping the community and connecting the community and taking players out to things like that sounds attractive to me. But you're doing the same thing in group sales. You're working with nonprofits and you're selling these opportunities with your fans and player interactions, and setting up where kids get to slap hands with players on the court or on the field. Those same things are happening on the sales side, but yet we don't connect those dots sometimes. So I think ultimately we have to rebrand what sales is and what revenue is to women, and we need to also start to inspire women to take this path because the opportunity is fantastic. And then ultimately, I think what you'll see is, as we get more women into the industry and growing, we'll see more women leaders in this space. And I think the way and what we bring, and I won't speak for all women, I hate when we're put in a box that like we're all the same. We're not. And so, certain women would bring a different perspective to the organization and the sales process. So I think it's extremely important for the health and growth of our business as well.
Awesome. So our next question is from Alex Guo, and he is wondering, what is the importance of company culture when it comes to working within a sales department, and how important is networking within an organization?
Yeah, I think your culture is one of the most important aspects of any organization. People drive culture and culture drives business. And I think it's extremely important that there's a lot of investment on building the framework as an organization. You have to build a framework in which the culture can sort of cultivate around the people who make that organization what it is. And that's the most important thing when it comes to a culture. If you work in a culture that's built top down, I think it's a challenge. And do you ever feel connected to what you do and why you go to work every day? And I think that's the key of the culture is it's really powered by the why. If we know why we're doing it, if your why is to sell tickets, then you're not going to connect and you're going to burn out, and it's not going to be the kind of culture you want to work in. But if your culture is around growing the game and building a community and making a difference and creating an opportunity to connect your fans with their passions, now you're starting to really connect and engage like why I want to come in and what I'm going to contribute to that culture and make it a phenomenal one for myself and for the people that I work with every single day. So I think that's key. And then networking internally, when you're on a team, the front office of an organization, everybody in there is your teammate, and at all levels. And I think as long as an organization has great culture, everybody should be accessible to you. And I think that's key, is like, are the top executives accessible? And I think that's key. And for me personally, like I find it so important that I have connections, engagement with people at all levels. And I have one-on-ones, and I'm on text chains with people, and I'm on threads with, jokes and stuff. And, it's just like, how accessible are you? How connected are you with your people? Would allow the opportunity for people to feel more open to network with you. And I think you gotta make those connections internally. And choose wisely. You can look at the landscape of your organization and be like, this person's really intriguing to me. I'm really curious. Reach out to that person and meet with them. And sometimes you'll recognize like, okay, I'm not surviving that person. Then stay with them. And I think the navigation is on you as you move forward.
And then our last question to kind of round out the night in our conversation is from Isaiah Freeman, and he would like to know, what is the most challenging aspect of your job?
Yeah, it's interesting. The most challenging aspect. I think the most challenging thing is that there's a lot of elements that are out of our control. And I think that's probably the most challenging. You have to accept that fact, and you have to control what you can control. I can't control if the team's going to win. I can't control what players are being recruited or drafted or the style of play. That's all out of my control. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is that regardless of what's happening on the field or on the court, I still have a responsibility to grow the business. And there's no excuses to that. Whether the team is good or bad or winning, like I have to develop a strategy and a plan to ensure that we're focusing on the fans and the growth of the fans and our partners and those relationships with the brands that are connected with us. And so we have to continue to move the needle forward regardless of what's happening. So I would say that's probably the biggest challenge, is that what you're doing there's some elements that are completely out of control. But again, that's a little bit what makes it exciting as well. And the drama of that makes you want more. It's a crazy thing. I would say this isn't a challenge for me. I feel like it's my lifestyle, but I think sometimes too, this industry, as you grow, it requires a lot of time. There's a huge time commitment. I mean, you think about a schedule. If you're in baseball, you have 81 home games. If you're in basketball, you have 44 home games. You're at every single one of those games, in addition to other events, and then at the office on everything else. So there's a huge time commitment. So you really got to love what you do. You got to fall in love with what you do, and you have to integrate the fact that there isn't a balance between personal life and professional life. It truly is a lifestyle, and that this is something that you choose to do and the life that you live in. And I absolutely love this lifestyle, and I think that that's key. But I know it's a challenge for many, and you got to find that connection and dedicate time to the things that you love and outside of just work. And I think that's important too, to structure that out.
I think that was a great note to end on. I know you're very busy, and I don't want to keep you too much longer from your family. So on behalf of myself and the Syracuse Sport Business Conference, I want to thank you so much for being here. I know I personally loved this conversation, and I learned a ton. And I hope we can have you on in the future. So,
yes, well, thank you for having me, Danielle, and thank you for everyone for listening in. And I wish you all luck as you continue to navigate forward. And let's stay connected and listen to Women Blazers.